Why are today's children so stressed out? Stress in children is a disturbing phenomenon and is growing by leaps and bounds. More and more parents nowadays report how their children are experiencing stress, anxiety, and even depression due to problems such as rising pressures of academics, exam anxiety, challenges of school life, peer demands, bullies, puberty problems, domestic abuse, parental neglect, negative impacts of social media, uncomfortable family situations, unwanted changes in life, personal problems, etc. We all believe children's stress is a recent problem and is an outcome of a digitally advanced, social media infested, modern world. But, is children's stress really just a recent problem? Or, could it be as old as humanity itself? But no one has ever heard of children's anxiety and stress in prehistoric, ancient or medieval times, whether gruesome history, legends, myths or grim fairy tales. Did children not have stress in those days? Or, if they had stress, how did they cope with it? Let's find out. Starting from the very start, evidences suggest that the ancient and Middle Ages treated children very differently from today. So differently, that modern people may not even be able to begin to imagine. Children, in general, led a much harder, harsher, traumatic, brutal and love-less childhood that was in keeping with the necessities and lifestyle of those times. They learned to work, hunt and kill right from kindergarten age and lived roughly that often, if not always, consisted of strenuous manual labor, stealing, raiding, lying, cheating, fighting, outsmarting, starving, separation, getting lost or abandoned from family, violent vengeance, getting tortured, becoming orphaned, stranded or destitute or getting sold in slavery. They suffered beatings, severe corporal punishments, did hard work to earn money to survive nearly like adults, and ran risks of losing their limbs or life on a frequent basis. They were used as enemy spies and even fought in wars as soldiers. As if this wasn't enough, child sacrifice was honorable and shamefully rampant. Infanticide was easiest form of birth control, and filicide, or the killing of a child by his or her own parents, was completely normal. If wars, diseases and poverty weren't, people themselves were regularly killing children for all sorts of reasons such as religion, blind superstition, social obligation and personal needs. In such horrifying times as these, we can surely imagine that the biggest luxury a child could have had, must have been to be able to stay near their loved ones and not being dead. According to Seneca, Philo, and Cicero, infants could be drowned, thrown away with the rubbish, smothered, exposed to the elements, eaten by stray dogs or sold to slave traffickers. It was not considered a crime to kill a child until 374 AD. Can you imagine children's trauma, anxiety and stress in those times? It is almost unimaginable to fathom that there was no concept of childhood. The concept of childhood first appeared in 1600s. But even 2 centuries later, the condition of children remained absolutely nightmarish, and industrialization just made it worse. Child exploitation skyrocketed, and nobody thought there was anything wrong with it. People saw children as additional source of income. Children as young as 4 years old worked in inhuman conditions in factories, farms, industries, and mines, or other dangerous jobs in war-torn years, for as little as a few pennies a month. And sometimes were even responsible for supporting their entire multi-headed family. Can you imagine their anxiety and stress now? The royalty and the upper class were, of course, different from common man as always. But even then, the royal and noble children didn't have it much easy either, as they constantly contended with serious ruling responsibilities, political marriages, dangerous conspiracies, underwent difficult religious practices, participated in bloody battles, wars, hunting and cruel sports of their day, apart from living a highly protected, highly exposed, highly pampered and highly risky royal life. Ludwig II, of Bavaria, Germany, is one of the most famous examples of being a product of a sad and stressful royal childhood. Then comes 19th century, when modern attitude towards childhood started emerging, which finally removed children from factories and banned child labor. Corporal punishments, money problems, mostly sad conditions in schools, colleges and orphanages, child exploitation, and crimes against children, infanticide, racism, Child marriages, prostitution, broken families, domestic abuse, physical violence and depression remained more or less constant, but started slowly being reported, causing more awareness towards children's issues. Children's problems began to be better understood, which in this case means, recognizing the issue that had always been there but had never been noticed, never was considered a problem, and never had a name. Unbelievable. It took humans thousands of years to understand that childhood is a beautiful thing and that children should be carefully nurtured and protected. By that time, humans knew way more about God, Earth, oceans, skies and stars billions of light years away than children in their own home, born out of their own flesh and blood. Now a 21st century child is completely different from all his predecessors. He gets free and compulsory education, has strictly defined rights in place, has child allowance in many parts of the world, has strong child protection laws backing him up at each and every step, and parents can actually be jailed if they fail to care for him in the right way. From shoes and clothings, to toys and furniture, from food and drinks to literature and media, each and every object used by him is specially made for children, and must pass rigorous testing to be certified as safe for him. He has freedom to choose whatever he wants, be it his t-shirt or career, breakfast cereal or university. He lives better than ever before, happier than ever before, safer than ever before, and basks under the sun of modern researches and studies that all repeat how special he is, and how we can make him safer and happier. True, he struggles with modern lifestyle problems such as over and unhealthy exposure to technology, internet, drugs, sedentary life mode, unhealthy food habits, child abuse, child neglect, trafficking, academic pressure, exam pressure, peer pressure, bullying etc. But this is something everyone, including adults of all ages, is suffering from, not just him. By the way, out of all these problems, only that with technology, media and internet is a new addition. Rest all other problems have been more or less always present in different forms, and in the past may even have been far worse, and hugely unnoticed, and underreported or totally unreported. So, despite living in the best of times in recorded human history, how exactly is today's child more stressed out than before? How is pressure of handling social media and peers, or getting good grades in exam, or change of residence worse than facing child labor, fighting in wars or cruelty in old times? Well, maybe this is how. The enormous amounts of attention, love, importance, protection and care that modern child starts receiving from birth, and which continues well into late adolescence or early adulthood, tends to overshelter him, and make him feel he is the center of the world. Which he is, except that he isn't. From infancy he grows up believing he is the best. Then he enters adolescence and discovers he isn't. Then he enters adulthood and discovers he isn't. He finds himself unable to cope with the real world, and this realization starts damaging him from deep inside, like a slow deflating car tire. The world that we adults present to the child when he is young, is not the same world he expects, dreams about, and receives when he grows up. This causes disorientation, disillusionment, and the child suddenly doesn't know what to do, what to expect, and how to cope. The child learns from adults around him, and we adults are very good at being remorselessly bad in many areas ourselves. We swear, cheat, drink and smoke but advise the child to stay away from it. We are ourselves addicted to screens of all sorts but want him to develop love for reading books. We fight wars and all the evils of the world and tell him the world consists of butterflies and rainbows. We believe that if we don't let him see something, he won't learn it. Well, the child is way smarter than this. He observes us and learns up all the things we never directly tell him, and chooses to ignore what we directly tell him too. Family situation also plays a vital role. Earlier, children had more siblings, family members, uncles, aunts, grandparents, neighbors etc. with whom to talk to, open up, share feelings, take advice, offload his tensions, and indirectly get a sort of immunity at handling pressures, problems and stresses. Nowadays the child gets no one to open up to, and no safe exposure to safe stress. Everybody just showers him with love, care, attention and gifts, and tries to shield him from stressors which inhibits his training to handle pressure. Interestingly, A couple decades ago, children with siblings got so much bullied by them at home, that they rarely had problems with bullies at school. They were immunized, or well trained, and could handle any amount of load. So, is immunity an interesting term here? Let's look at it more carefully. People living in first world countries have allegedly lower immunity and lower resistance due to less exposure to disease-causing pathogens, whereas, people living in third world countries have higher immunity and better resistance due to greater exposure to disease-causing germs. Newborn infants have no prior exposure to microbes and are therefore particularly vulnerable to infections. Can it be that children, who are not exposed to safe stressors, grow up to develop a somewhat weak mental defense system that is highly susceptible to anxiety and stress, and will therefore stress out easily? Another example, the blue whales and the krills. This is a curious phenomenon noticed by Stanford University researchers in 2012. Blue whales feed largely on krills, eating 4 tons of krills daily on an average. When number of whales dramatically dropped due to overwhaling, the number of krills mysteriously dropped too, instead of increasing as scientists had logically predicted. But, why and how did this happen? Researchers found out a very interesting phenomenon. When whales ate krills, they pooped krills. This krilly poop were absorbed by phytoplanktons or floating ocean plants. These phytoplanktons were then consumed by krills whom the whales ate. A perfect food chain. So, when whales reduced, there was no krill poop to feed phytoplanktons, so phytoplanktons reduced dramatically, which in turn starved the krills and reduced their number too. Mind-blowing. Isn't it? Scientists hadn't thought that the chief enemy of the krills was directly or indirectly the chief reason for their survival. Could it be the same with children's stress? Means, if children get safe stress they have less stress in the long run, and if they don't have stress do they face more stress in the long run? Does it mean there's a secret connection between stress and happiness as there is between blue whales and krills? That is, if we have stress, we know how to fight it, and so we get immunized and don't get stressed, or better able to fight it. On the contrary, if we don't have stress, we don't know how to fight it, so we don't develop immunity towards it and we end up getting badly stressed. Even philosophy openly asserts the same principle: anything that hurts us is there for a reason, that is, to help us resist it and become strong in the process. If we never fall down, we never become strong. If we never fall sick, we never become immune. It seems like a remote but clear form of learning by doing, does it not? So, is absence of stress in childhood the prime reason for children to suffer from stress? Is absence of stress causing children to be unprepared for stress, so when they do encounter stress however small, they are caught completely off guard and can't handle it at all? So today's children have maybe lesser stress than children of bygone times, but like those of bygone times, today's children have no training, no exposure, no immunity and no ability to deal with it. They are more like a snail without his shell. Coming back to where we started, children in old times fared badly, but due to being exposed to stress, they had better immunity and tolerance towards it and could deal with it more effectively and efficiently than our modern children who have less immunity and tolerance towards stress in comparison. This does solve the mystery of why today's children are more stressed out, but it raises a very uncomfortable question. How can we modern parents, knowing better than our ancestors how stress damages us, consciously allow our children to suffer from stress, in order to build their immunity and tolerance towards the same? For sure, it is going to be a tremendously challenging question for our child psychologists. Meanwhile, what we can do, is to make sure, that in nurturing our children lovingly, helping them grow happily to their full potential, and providing them with everything that they need and want, we are careful to develop their abilities, and not damage their defense mechanism in the process. For example, if we regularly provide an animal with its food, we damage its natural ability to procure food for itself. If we constantly carry a baby in our arms, he never learns to walk. Looking from this point of view, are we guilty of preparing the road a bit too much for our children? And in doing so, are we strengthening them or weakening their natural defense mechanism that makes them stronger and readies them for actual world? We can't carry a baby constantly in our arms and worry that the baby has no ability to walk. But that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching.